US President Donald Trump criticized Putin for his unwillingness to end the war. He questions Putin's willingness to end the invasion of Ukraine. Moreover, he said that Vladimir Putin was leading him by the nose. At the same time, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that this week would be crucial for Ukraine's ceasefire talks. So how does Donald Trump understand that Vladimir Putin is leading him by the nose, and why does this week could become another crucial in ceasefire talks for the outcome of the war? US President Donald Trump for the first time said that Vladimir Putin was leading him by the nose. He said that he fears that Putin was tapping him along by not only refusing to agree with full ceasefire deal, but also by attacking Ukrainian civilian infrastructure using Russia's drones and missiles, even after declared ceasefire in the air and at sea. As we know, also, US President Donald Trump recently met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Vatican. Trump said that this meeting was highly productive, and after meeting President Zelensky, Trump made this first bold statement criticizing Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and also Russia's unwillingness to actually end the war. Moreover, Trump threatened to impose another secondary tariffs and sanctions on Russian economy if Putin continues to tapping him along, if Putin continues to leading Trump by the nose. As we know, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has only agreed to partial ceasefire in the air. However, the ceasefire has already expired because Vladimir Putin did not extend the ceasefire in the air. Moreover, during Easter, Vladimir Putin tried to play another game, tried to demonstrate that he is ready to enforce peace. During the Eastern time, Putin imposed so-called one-day ceasefire in Ukraine. Interesting that Russia has violated its own ceasefire more than 3,000 times. However, after this one-day ceasefire, Putin did not extend the ceasefire for another week or for another month, despite the fact that even Western leaders and President Zelensky were urging Putin to extend the ceasefire. So for the first time and for today, there is no actual ceasefire in the air and at sea because Putin refused to extend the ceasefire in the air and also on the ground. At the same time, according to Axios, there is a final offer to Ukraine and Russia made by US President Donald Trump and his team. So White House offers, for example, to recognize Crimea as a Russian territory. There are lots of points and demands which could be satisfied by the Russian side. So Trump's administration is proposing to firstly recognize Crimea as a Russian territory. As we know, Russia has illegally occupied Crimea and annexed Crimea in 2014. However, no one in the world recognized this illegal act, but US President Donald Trump proposed to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. Moreover, Trump's administration is ready to recognize Russia's Ukrainian territory occupied by Russia now in Ukraine as a de facto Russian territory. So Trump's administration is getting ready to recognize Russia's control over occupied territories in Ukraine. Also, Trump would like to ban Ukraine from joining NATO and also satisfying this Russian demand. On the other hand, Ukraine and also Russia will be lifted sanctions. Trump's administration is ready to lift all sanctions imposed by Putin's regime, imposed on Putin's regime after 2014 and after the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. On the other hand, Ukraine should get robust security guarantees, but no one knows how should these security guarantees look like in practice, because Trump's administration is also unwilling to commit any kind of troops to this big mission, peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, which should be conducted after ceasefire talks. Moreover, Trump's administration is not really willing to support UK and French troops in Ukraine. So this is still remains a big question. How would the United States government secure and provide security guarantees for Ukraine if Donald Trump doesn't like and would not like to provide Ukraine with any kind of peacekeeping force to deter Russia from another attack in the future? On the other hand, we have Russia, and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has been announcing another unrealistic demands. Also, Vladimir Putin urged the US to halt security assistance for Ukraine, and it also remains a big question whether the Trump administration would provide Ukraine with security guarantees. On the other hand, also, it seems like Trump's administration is not ready to give Vladimir Putin everything he wants, according to Bloomberg. So according to Bloomberg, the United States government and Trump's administration is putting pressure on Russia and is demanding Vladimir Putin to at least accept Ukrainian right to have a proper equipped army, and also to accept Ukraine's right to have its own military industrial base to produce at least weapons for its own country. As we know, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, has been demanding a so-called demilitarization of Ukraine. He would like Ukrainian army to capitulate and not to receive any kind of weapons, and he would like Ukraine to halt production of any kind of weapons which help Ukraine to defend itself against Russian aggression. However, it seems unlikely that Trump's administration would be ready to give up Vladimir Putin everything he wants, because Trump is putting pressure on Putin to at least, and is demanding from Putin to at least accept Ukraine's right to have its own army and its own military industrial base to develop weapons for Ukraine. So it's interesting information, and we will also cover another developments as these talks are ongoing right now. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that this week would be crucial for Ukraine ceasefire talks. Rubio is confident that this week will be crucial as another negotiations will take place around the world between American, Russian, and Ukrainian delegation. Last week, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin said that he would be ready to conduct direct negotiations between Ukrainian and Russian government, and also it seems like Trump's administration will continue its efforts to bring peace to Ukraine this week. However, it is still uncertain on whether terms the deal could be reached right now, because last week Trump also said that the deal could be reached in a week. However, it still seems like there is a need for more time to negotiate proper ceasefire deal. Also, as Donald Trump tries to negotiate a ceasefire, U.S. Republican Congressman Lindsey Graham urged Trump to impose sanctions and tariffs on Russia. So it seems like Trump's administration is waiting and is buying more time to negotiate a ceasefire without imposing sanctions on Russia. It seems like sanctions and secondary tariffs on Russian goods and oil, this is a measure of last resort for Trump's administration, because their main first priority is to settle the war, and if they fail to do so, then they would use this measure of last resort, impose sanctions and tariffs on the Russian economy. At the same time, according to The Telegraph, Trump's administration for the first time said that it is ready to provide some kind of security commitment to UK and French-led coalition of the willing. So for the first time, Trump's administration has signaled that it is ready to provide logistical and financial support for so-called coalition of the willing. The United Kingdom, France, and other allies are ready and are preparing for deployment to Ukraine, to deploy troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire deal is reached to properly deter Russia from another attack in the future, and to help Ukraine to have security and to help Ukraine to defend itself against Russian soldiers on the ground. However, for many weeks, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been putting pressure on Trump and has been trying to persuade Trump to commit any kind of help for this mission, because without US backstop for this mission, it would be really difficult for UK and France to conduct this mission without American involvement. However, for the first time, Trump's administration has signaled that it is ready to provide logistical intelligence and financial support for this mission, and it's also seems to be a positive development after months of negotiations between American and British counterparts, because it's really important for Ukraine and France to have this so-called US backstop to properly enforce ceasefire, deploy troops to Ukraine with any kind of at least symbolic American participation. And it seems like Trump's administration will provide intelligence for allies, logistical support and financial support, and that's how this mission could be conducted. American allies and also British, French allies are serious about deploying troops to Ukraine. They will deploy troops to Ukraine after ceasefire on the ground, and also will help Ukraine to defend its skies, to conduct so-called air patrolling mission over Ukraine to deter Russia from another attack on Ukraine. But stay with us on YouTube, and we will analyze the next development regarding Ukraine's ceasefire talks and Trump's willingness to end the war in the recent weeks. That's all for today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and glory to Ukraine.